Okay, we are recording now. And we just talked about we cannot leave an imaginary number or a complex number in the denominator because an imaginary number represents the square root of -1. And we're not allowed to leave a radical in the denominator of a fraction. Okay, so when we had things like this, 2 over the square root of 3, what did we do to eliminate the radical from the denominator? We multiplied by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. Because when we multiply by something over itself, that's really like multiplying by a value of 1. Anytime we take a number and divide it by itself, it is 1, correct? So it's multiplying by a value of 1, but it changes the form so that we no longer have a radical in the denominator. We're going to do the same thing here. Okay? So, if I look at my first one, I have 6 over 3i. Well, 3i is really 3 times I, isn't it? And because 3 divides into both the numerator and denominator, I can actually go ahead and do that and start off by reducing it to 2 over I. So now I'm down to something that's even easier, 2 over I. But I cannot leave I in the denominator. So what do? We multiply the numerator and denominator by I. So this gives me 2I over I squared. But I squared is -1. So it's 2I over -1 or -2I. Okay, now I'm going to tweak this problem just a hair. What if instead of multiplying by I had multiplied by -I? Wouldn't that have given me a +1 in the denominator and gone ahead and made the numerator -2i? So that's kind of a quicker way to do it because it keeps the negative out of the denominator.
But you would always get the same answer.
You will get the same answer. You can do it either way.
Okay.
Yeah. So on this one, let's try that quicker way. So instead of multiplying by I, let's multiply by -I. Okay, so in the numerator, I'm going to have to distribute.
Okay. So it doesn't matter what.
You may go ahead and ask your question. What was it? You started.
I got it.
Okay. Okay, so this is going to change that to a -7. And if I squared is -1, then -I squared would have to be +1, right? So this simplifies to +1. So really all I have to do is move around my numerator and make it -7 minus 4i, and I'm done. Okay, let's look at number 3. Is it okay to have the 2 in the denominator? Yeah. But it's not okay to have the I. So we just need this I to go away. How do we do that?
Multiply by -1.
Multiply the numerator and denominator by -I. I get it started, you finish it.
Multiply the bottom by -I, wouldn't you have -2i?
So it ends up being positive 2.
So it's 1 times 2.
This makes about this much
Just
sense.
1 plus.
This much.
Do you want us to do both 3 and 4?
Hold on. Okay, so when I multiplied by the negative I, it made this negative 2I squared. But what does multiplying by I squared do? It just changes the sign. So this is now a positive 2. So my denominator this time, I have 1. It's 2. The numerator was this. Negative 3I minus I squared. Well, I squared is really negative 1, right? So what happens to a minus negative? It makes a positive 1. So the 1 will come first, and the minus 3I will come second. Okay, so this had an imaginary, an imaginary, an imaginary. But the next one has a complex. And the only way to eliminate the imaginary part when you have a complex number is to multiply by the conjugate. Okay, so conjugate. Now, it's a big sounding word. It sounds like we're about to do some conjugation in Spanish. We're not. If this is complex form, the conjugate is where we just change the sign of the imaginary part. That's all we do. So if this is 2 minus I, we multiply by 2 plus I. So whenever we have a complex denominator, we multiply by its conjugate. And you're about to see why. Something really cool happens every time we multiply conjugates. Every time. Okay? So when we distribute the denominator, the 2 times the 2 is 4. The 2 times the I is positive 2I. The negative times the 2 is negative 2I. And then the negative I times the I is negative I squared. Yeah. So every time you multiply conjugates, that outer product and the inner product always cancel. And so every time it's going to eliminate the imaginary part. Because what is I squared, guys? Negative 1. So this is like minus negative 1. What happens to minus and negative? It's plus. Okay. So the denominator is 5. And so every time we multiply a complex number by its conjugate, we're going to end up with just a real number. The imaginary part gets canceled out. Now, the numerator doesn't work that way. So we're going to get 6 plus 3i. And then we're going to get 2i plus I squared. And I squared is negative 1. So 6 and negative 1 is 5. And 3i and 2i is 5i. But do you see that everything divides by? So it simplifies to 1 plus I.
Why is there one divided by?
5 divided by 5 is 1. So if there's a number that will divide into everything, you should do that. If it won't divide into everything, you don't. Alright, we're not going to do the you try because we don't have time. It's almost time to go.
A little homework for us.
I'm missing.
Back is your homework.
Yeah.
For number 5, but it's still
I'm a joke.